Hi everyone, in this video we're going to have a look at how you connect QuickBooks to your Buildxact account. Specifically we're talking about QuickBooks Online in North America. And we're going to look at the connection process, how we sync things back and forward, what options you've got upon which direction the data flows from Buildxact to QuickBooks or backwards. And this should be a pretty comprehensive little video for you to go and then either connect it yourself or at least know how we work with QuickBooks. Now I'm going to start with a little diagram. Personally, I find it easiest to just kind of go across this at a high level before we actually start clicking buttons or doing anything. So what we're looking at here is obviously Buildxact, accounting, which in this case is QuickBooks, and the bank. And I'm going to just scribble all over this to try and illustrate where stuff is coming from and where it's headed to. So if we look at the customer invoices, first of all, this is one of the things that we send to QuickBooks. The flow, or how this is actually going to happen when we sync stuff, is we'll create an invoice in Buildxact, send it across to this happy little person, and at the point at which it's marked as invoiced, it will kind of bank up with other items waiting to go to QuickBooks. You will hit the sync button, which kind of releases it and pushes those through. And while this is all happening, in the background, the client is hopefully making payment. That payment will show up in your bank. And what that means is that QuickBooks has the sale from Buildxact on file. And when you do your bank matching or reconciling, we're able to go, hey, yep, that item that we're expecting payment for has landed in the bank, tick, we've been paid, and cross it off the list. For customer invoicing, that's pretty much all there is to it. The only extra point I should add is we on occasion get people who go, hey, look, I really just work solely on credit card payments and hence I take payment through QuickBooks. So really I need to push the invoice from QuickBooks first. Cool, no problem. If that's you, the only difference will be that you, instead of sending the invoice from Buildxact to QuickBooks, you first mark it as invoiced and sync it, and then issue that out of QuickBooks. It'll then be a QuickBooks invoice, which means pay online and credit card payments are an option. Versus for Buildxact invoices, we have a text field down the bottom where people typically type in, hey, checks payable to this company, we accept e-transfer or Venmo or whatever else you want to do. We don't have an online payment gateway for Buildxact. So that's the invoices, first of all. And then we look at the other stream of data we have with QuickBooks, which is all around expenses. Now with this, we've kind of got more options. So option one is we can start from Buildxact, which is to say we tell Buildxact that a purchase has been made, and specifically we're looking at a purchase order, which when we get into Buildxact I'll point out specifically, but in Buildxact there is purchase orders and work orders, and only the purchase orders sync to QuickBooks. That's done on purpose so that internal work costs go under work orders and don't end up in QuickBooks. But when we push this purchase or expense into Buildxact, same thing, it'll bank up with other items waiting to go across, and we release it all and it syncs and we create this list of bills or payable items in QuickBooks. Very similar to the customer invoice, that payment may already exist in your bank because maybe you paid on credit card, and we're able to reconcile and bank match that bill against the bank feed and then go, hey, yep, that's been paid, crossed off the list. That's one option for the expensing. And the other option is just for the expense function, we can turn all of that on its head and say, we're going to grab items, expenses that are entered into QuickBooks. We're then going to grab those and send them back to Buildxact. And instead of everything starting with Buildxact, it's starting with QuickBooks, and we're just really taking the feed of expenses from QuickBooks. Which one's better? Common question. My suggestion is if you're using an automated app, or you're emailing bills to QuickBooks, or your accountant's entering it all for you, you probably be better sending it from QuickBooks backwards. That said, if you you are entering stuff or you want to send purchases and hence you're entering it into Buildxact first, it's better that you send it from Buildxact through to QuickBooks. We're going to look at both ways so you can make up your own mind, but really just to flag, those are the two main options as far as syncing expenses. Righto, let's go into my QuickBooks account. Step one, we need to connect to QuickBooks. So we'll run through this, then we'll look at an example of each of those different flows and demystify that a little bit. So when I go connect, first of all, I'm definitely cheating. I've already logged into a QuickBooks account, hence it's not going to ask me to log in and take me through those steps. It takes me straight to here and it'll have a little think about it. It does the connection. Sometimes depending on your QuickBooks account, and I do find there are differences in how we work with different QuickBooks accounts, there may be a step asking you to select your business. In that case, just make sure you pick the right one and we're all good. Now, looking back at this again, each of these different flows, invoices into QuickBooks, purchase orders into QuickBooks, or bills back from QuickBooks, has a relevant area. So this first one looks at everything Buildxact to QuickBooks. The second one looks at everything QuickBooks to Buildxact. Generally speaking, if you are going to pull the bills back from QuickBooks, you're going to turn off this sync received purchases solely so that we don't create this loop of things going to QuickBooks and then coming back. For me, I'm actually going to go through all of the examples, so I'll leave that on. But let's just talk about the boxes you need to fill out and what they all mean. So first of all, these two are you deciding, hey, am I going to get those purchase orders or expenses from Buildxact and send them to QuickBooks? Yes or no? Am I going to do the same for invoices, for customers? Yes or no? How far back do I want to look for things to sync? So depending on your scenario, if you've used Buildxact for years and you're now just plugging in QuickBooks, I would definitely suggest having this date be the date that you first connect, so that we don't pull all of the old stuff from Buildxact into QuickBooks. If you have been doing QuickBooks for ages and you're newer to Buildxact, I would generally suggest you pick a kind of a changeover date. So it could be like the end of this month, and you go, hey, at this point, we're going to stop entering these into QuickBooks manually, and we're going to let Buildxact do it. And because of that, you can actually set it into the future, which means it'll do nothing until that date hits. Working on down, this section here is only relevant if you are going to sync purchase orders or expenses. So I'll run through it, but you'll notice as soon as I tick that off, all these little orange stars that say it's mandatory disappear. So if we're syncing from Buildxact into QuickBooks, first of all, we need to know where to send supplier expenses. It knows it's a supplier versus a contractor because when we create the expense, Buildxact looks at the contacts list and everyone will be listed as either a supplier or a contractor. Based on which bucket we find them in, we then send them to the corresponding account in QuickBooks. So for me, I've gone from my QuickBooks chart of accounts and just selected a suppliers and a subcontractors one. Then we go on down, and this is where we start getting tax involved. Now, quick note, my QuickBooks is a Canadian QuickBooks account, which doesn't really change anything in any massive way. It just means I've got GST, PST for British Columbia, instead of what you might see if you're a American user. You would see, let's say you're in Austin, Texas. One of these would be called TX-Austin, and then it'd have in brackets 8.25%. So literally all you're going to see in this list is your corresponding tax rates as they're set up in QuickBooks. Quick pause to say, if you come here and there is nothing in it, not great, but it's pretty easy to fix. If I jump over to my QuickBooks and get out of there, under the sales tax area, some versions of QuickBooks just say tax, but if I go in here, mine's already configured for British Columbia. If you come in here and there's a big box saying, hey, turn on auto sales tax, you'll need to go through that step before we can make the connection. Really all that does is exposes to Buildxact the different tax rates available so that we can then connect with the right one. So as I'm going through, if it says it's an expense with tax, then you want a tax rate. If it says that it's an expense tax-free, you want a 0%. Going on through, that rule applies to these as well. This has GST tax, 12%. PST, I've actually got in my QuickBooks bundled together, GST and PST. And then this is without tax, so it's 0% again. For the customer invoices, same exact thing. It wants to know where in my QuickBooks accounts do I push this to. As a side note, every time we sync with QuickBooks, we refresh the account list and we refresh the tax list. So in the case that you add a new account, it won't show up in Buildxact here until you do a sync, or alternatively disconnect and reconnect. Going on through, same exact rules for the tax. If it's got tax, we tell it, we match it to the QuickBooks tax code. If it's got no tax, we match it to an exempt or tax exempt or no tax code. And we do that right the way through. On the setup of the importing of bills, so specifically my purple arrow from QuickBooks back to Buildxact, generally, well, first of all, what we're looking at is it's wanting to know which accounts in QuickBooks to look at. Generally, when we set people up for the first time, we leave this blank so it just shows everything. As you go through the process of importing bills and you realize what accounts are actually relevant and what's not, you can be more selective and you can go and choose a whole bunch of them and tell us which accounts to look at. All right, let's go do some examples for all of those. Just for now, so it doesn't confuse itself, I'm going to turn off imported bills and save. And I'm going to go into a job that I already have open, which is QuickBooks Demo, aptly named. Now, this part of the video will go kind of quickly through creating the expense because there's a whole other video just on purchase orders. So I'm going to go, what have I got? Plumbing. This is the items that I originally budgeted for. I'm going to go grab and order. Note that the word here, order, is kind of misleading, I think, because it's taking us into the order process, which involves both sending and receiving of the amount. My example, I'm going to skip the sending. Like I said, there's a whole other video just on that. So for me, description of what it is, plumbing, who it's going to be. I don't know if I have a plumber in here. Yep, that'll do. And if I was sending the order, I'd fill out heaps more boxes, but for now, not interested, going straight to received. And for the sake of this one, I'm going to do a full received item. Note that in other videos, we talk about how to do part received as well, which is where you kind of draw down or chip away at this overall amount. QuickBooks wants to know the invoice number. If it's a supplier and their invoice or receipt number is like 300 digits, just do ... last 4 digits, more than enough. You'd be pretty unlucky to have 2 receipt numbers ending in the same 4 digits. If it's a duplicate, it's still going to let you do it. It's just trying to flag that, hey, there's already an expense with this receipt or reference number existing. You might want to double check that you haven't already entered it, especially if you're doing a lot of these and you maybe late at night, a bit exhausted. But it's just trying to flag this already might exist. So I'm going to put all this in. Mine has tax, so I'm going to make sure all the amounts are correct and go received. That item is now sitting down in integrations, which is why I've got this little orange number, telling me, hey, you've got stuff banked up, waiting to go. On the customer invoice side, I've got just my example stages set up in here. For a job this size, realistically, you might have just 2 invoices or 2 progress claims or 3. But for me, I'm just using these as examples. And when I come in here and mark that as invoiced, meaning I've sent it to the customer. Side note, if you email it or share it, it'll go to invoiced automatically on its own. But like, let's say I do this, invoiced, and save it now, or in a second, there it goes. We'll have another thing waiting to sync. Just while I'm at it, If for any reason you want to exclude something from syncing, you go exclude. This is true of both the purchase orders and the customer invoices. And then if you decided that's a mistake, you can unblock it and it'll be ready to sync again. Once it has synced, this button will be replaced by a resync button. And that just allows you to push it through multiple times if you ever need to. Awesome. Just on that, while I'm here, the scenario where you sync it to QuickBooks and then you need to resync it, most commonly it's someone synced it into QuickBooks, didn't know what it was, deleted it, and then every time we sync something, we keep a record of it so we don't double sync things by accident. Resync is basically just telling it, hey, it's good to send this one more time, and you can resync it as many times as you want if you're continually making mistakes on it. Awesome. Let's go sync to QuickBooks. It'll say this can take 5 minutes. It very rarely it takes that long. You'd have to be syncing hundreds of things. And so what I'm going to do, I'm just actually going to go out and go back. And there it goes. So I navigated away, came back, and it was already finished. Little side note, it's always going to say successful or fail. If it's a failure, there'll be a little exclamation mark next to my orange one. And my orange one is sitting there for another reason related to my supplier integration. So just a note, that's why it still says one thing where it's just synced to QuickBooks. View log will show if anything happened or if there was any mistakes or etc. As a side note, you can see generated bill for supplier GHP Plumbing and Civil. One thing I did not mention before is anytime we sync into QuickBooks, we do a check for the existing supplier, existing customer, client, and if they don't exist, we will shift that contact details across into QuickBooks for you. Because of that, if you have been using QuickBooks for several years and you are now new to Buildxact, it can be worth exploring bulk importing your contacts. There is a totally separate article on this. If you go to the need help and search for importing contacts, it'll come up. If you get stuck on that, that's one thing, well, as anything, you can reach out and ask us questions and we can help. All right, let's go to see where this goes in QuickBooks. So first of all, the expense. Click on expenses. QuickBooks has multiple types, so grouped under bills or expenses. When we push in, we make everything a bill. Because we don't assume that it's already paid, which is the definition of what an expense is. So we have a bill so that it can have a payment date in the future. Note that once it's here, you're likely going to reconcile it with your bank or make payment. So the fact that it's a bill, it may go in, be a bill for 10 seconds, and then you match it with something and it's done and crossed off. So just note that everything we push in right now is as a bill. And if I look at this one, it's brought in the contact, it's brought in the bill date, the due date. Buildxact knew both those. It's brought in the bill number. Actually, I should just clarify something. I said Buildxact sent both of these, not quite correct. The bill date we sent in this case, the due date was calculated by QuickBooks. There is, without going way down the rabbit hole, there are ways to have QuickBooks auto default payment due dates to say end of month or 30 days or something like that. In my case, it's just gone, it's assumed it's due on receipt, which is why the due date and bill date are the same. Buildxact set this subcontractors account. That was what we set way back at the start via here. And it's pushed in the tax as relevant. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. So it's up to you now to then make a payment or reconcile it or action it in whatever way you need. For sales, so we push it in under an invoice. I often just go all sales and that's where I scroll through. But under the invoices, I'll go here. These are the two I pushed in. In fact, one was from prior to this video and one was just from something I created this time. Go into this, very similar. So I'm actually going to go edit to get it to full screen. And again, this is where I find there's different versions of QuickBooks that do different things. So it's brought in it's done some balancing of the tax, which probably means I had tax exempt items in my original estimate. So what it's done is brought across the amount so that it all balances for tax, and it has brought across things like the customer, the invoice number from Buildxact, invoice date, due date. Buildxact did set both of those. And again, now yours to action, whether that means reconciling or ticking it off when you receive a check from the customer. Lovely. Now, the last bit to cover is going back to Buildxact, turning off the received purchases, because I'm going to do things the other way now, which is the importing of bills. I'm going to go save. And for imported bills, you're going to see them under the jobs heading. We've got imported bills as the section I want to be in. And what this does, this is a rolling 30 days of stuff that we're importing. So to say that a different way, if today was the 1st of April and we had something go in on the 28th of February to QuickBooks, it wouldn't be here. Because of that, it's pretty important that you are doing this at least once a month. Most people do it weekly, bi-weekly. What we're doing is reconciling this into the Buildxact jobs so they go to the right places. So for me, I've got a couple of things. I'm using this view line items to see more detail. And a specific note, the items that we've got here were the item name on the bill or expense in QuickBooks. Note that when we're pulling from QuickBooks, we look at both expenses and bills because we have to. But when we push across, it's only bills. So if I'm looking at something like this, which is the one that that is in QuickBooks that's now looking to pull back, as a side note, you can have description be anything. So if it's more helpful for you to have plumbing quote -123 Smith Street or something with more detail, that's going to show here. So really just to say, the more information QuickBooks has, the better, because we can then make a better decision on where to put this item. Let's do this one, the John Smith, the electrical items. So 3 boxes we need to fill out. Close that for a sec. First box, what job is it? So I'm going to go QuickBooks Demo. Category. If I was to go into the job now, I would see that all these categories currently exist. And my job to do is really to go, hey, this is electrical, put it under electrical. You can type into this as well, which is kind of helpful. And another thing worth knowing is if the category doesn't exist, which sometimes happens if you didn't budget for something or it's a job that you just started on its own, you can absolutely go type in whatever you want. New category, sundries, overheads, anything. And that will force it to create a category called that. For me, I'm going to go electrical, that one, which is, where are we, down here. And third thing here is when we're pulling it back, at a minimum, we need to tell Buildxact which job category to go to. We have the option, or the luxury, if you like, of selecting a specific item. And generally, I'll do this in the case of I've got a budget line for the quote and I'm matching the exact quote to that. Or it could be that I had an allowance for subcontractors and I'm assigning it directly to that line. Simply put, if you want it to match to an existing line in the job, select the line. If you don't and you just want it to add as a new category expense, go create order and leave this item blank. Note you can link to existing orders, but I'm not really going to cover that specifically. Most commonly, people are just creating orders for the sake of keeping the records. As it gets better and better, it's going to recognize more and more who the contacts are. So for now, I'm just going to say it can be me for now. I've got a test account, definitely. I've got a few of me in here. Let's go here, add a quick description, totally optional. I like doing it. Often I'll just copy paste from QuickBooks description and save and close. That's it. Disappears from my list because it's taken care of. exactly the same as if I went ignore, which is to tell it disappear, I don't need you anymore. I would generally do that ignore option in the case of items that are just not job related. So could be you picked up some dinner on the way back from a job. We don't need that. Or things like gas or petrol, if you're tracking that specifically, then yes, bring it in. If not, it's not needed. Phone bills, office lease, etc. Really just depends how you're estimating for your jobs, but a lot of those overheads generally don't need to be in Buildxact. Lucky last, let's go to the job I just created and into the actual cost, and I put it under electrical. So I did not select a specific item, hence it's added it right at the bottom. And you can see pretty quickly why. Like, I budgeted a lot of stuff and ordered and purchased all of that. And I want that to just line up against the overall category cost. But I didn't really want to have to go and select each specific line to tee it to. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully we've covered everything. This is quite a long video, so hopefully you still made it through. And as always, any questions, reach out, let us know. Here to help. Book time with us. Contact our support team, book sessions with us, all of that kind of stuff. We are here to keep you up and running. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.